Hi, this is Kate from Generate Magic. So, you probably heard the concept that fulfillment is not about the thing. And it's one of these things that we hear it so often that it's very easy to dismiss it or take it for granted, or just to hear it and be like, well, yeah, right. Of course it's about the thing. Of course it's about the money, the health, the relationship, the having the great body. Of course it's about all that. Otherwise, like, why? What are we even here for? And so I want to give you, and that was my reaction for a long time too, but I want to give you an example of how I pretty much have very solid proof at this point of how fulfillment is really not about the thing. And so I talked before about the changing goalposts, but I want to talk about it from a slightly different angle. And so I noticed this tendency within myself that whenever I would experience a so called win, there would always be a yeah, but attached to it. Kind of like the when you're a kid and you come home and you're all excited because you got an A on your test, and your parents said, well, yeah, but it should have been an A plus. And so it's that sort of thing. And so for instance, like I made a sale recently and I was very excited and very proud of myself. But then I realized that I knew the person who had bought the product. And so then all of a sudden I was like, well, it doesn't really count. Or like I talked about before with landing this position, and I was really proud to land this position. And but then I came up for all these reasons why I shouldn't be proud of it and I shouldn't be too excited. Like it was not a permanent position, like I could get demoted or I could lose it at any moment, so I probably shouldn't even talk about it. And so you could see, right, how it's just always when you're kind of playing from that when you're playing that game, like it's always going to be a losing scenario. And the absurd thing is that even in my fantasies, like even for instance, sometimes I would like imagine like winning the lottery jackpot and I would feel like very excited, but even then I would come up with yeah buts. Like yeah, once they take all the taxes out, it won't really be that much. And then you also hear sometimes about people that win the really big jackpot, like the multi-millions, and sometimes people come after them, like sometimes they even get murdered. And so all these different scenarios were kind of playing through my mind. And I'm sure we all know somebody like this, like somebody that always sees the glass half empty. My coworkers and I even had many years ago. We even had a another coworker that we would sometimes joke about. We would call her Eeyore, because it seemed like no matter what, she would always put a negative spin on the situation. And I think at one point she even did win a substantial amount of money in the lottery, and we were all joking that she would somehow put a negative spin on the situation. But the thing is that everybody is a mirror, and so anytime you find yourself making these judgments about other people, always kind of think about, what is this saying about myself? And I always generally thought of myself as being like an optimistic person or a positive person, but I recognized when I started to look at this yeah but tendency that there were a lot of places where I was seeing the glass half empty. But there's no need to beat ourselves up, and there's no shame, no condemnation, because the good news is I was actually very excited when I finally made this connection, because to me this was actually proof that it really wasn't about the thing, because it seemed like no matter what I achieved, even if it was something very specific that I wanted, there was always like a maybe it would be like a fleeting moment of celebration or satisfaction, but then it was always like this, it was always just on to the next thing, or there was always something that I would find wrong with the scenario. Kind of like I gave this example once many years ago when I was a kid, and my grandmother had just had her house cleaned, like professionally cleaned, and it looked really nice. Everything was bright and shiny, and then she was kind of like squinting at the corner, and I couldn't figure out what she was talking about. And she was like, "Oh, do you see that dust in the corner?" And it was just like a little tiny, like it could fit on your finger piece of dust. And but yeah, it's like finding the dust even in a seemingly perfect scenario. And so and so when I realized this, it was very liberating because it was like, well, I don't even it's not really about the scenario. It's really all I have to do is change my lens. And that is something that is easily within my locus of control. And I made another video about this, but it's this whole idea of, am I seeing through the lens of lack or the lens of love? And so lack, it could also be satisfaction, unworthiness, not good enough. And love, well, that's kind of self explanatory. And another way of looking at it is just to ask yourself, as they say in A Course in Miracles, can I see love instead of this? And it's also about perfectionism versus divine perfection. And perfectionism is the constant seeking and striving and always judging yourself or always judging the situation, never feeling satisfied. Where as divine perfection is just seeing through the eyes of God. And so like I talked about before, this whole idea of radical acceptance and using your power as a creator, as an alchemist, to be able to see the beauty and to be able to see the love and the magic and the joy and the bliss in every situation, no matter how seemingly bad the situation looks on the surface. And I actually have like fun exercise called Alchemize crap into gold. And it's literally taking something that you believe is like a really crappy experience and finding the gold in it, finding the joy in it. And the more you do this, the more you'll realize that the power is in your hands. It's not in the situation. And that you have the ability again to transform any situation, to see any situation through the eyes of God. And and I want to give another example about seeing and vision, which I think is interesting. And so, for instance, like I was with my friend the other day and we were playing in her backyard, and I was like, "Oh, your cat looks so cute." And she was very baffled by what I was talking about. And then I pointed to her black cat, like a little kitten that was sitting on her trampoline, and she started laughing and she was like, "Oh, I thought that was like a black sweater." And so it shows that depending on the vision, we can literally see something that's completely different. And I talked about it before from the perspective of a filmmaker, this whole idea of changing your lens. And so if you're seeing it from a gritty, grimy lens, the glass half empty lens, you can choose at any moment to swap out the lens. And maybe you want to see it through a sepia tone, maybe yeah, and so it's maybe you want to see it like through and it's so funny too, like these things that you have people have like, oh, you see everything through a rose colored lens, and they say it like it's a bad thing. And but I don't see anything wrong with seeing things through a rose-colored lens. And because we're having this life anyway, right? We're having this experience anyway. And so why not choose to see it the way that we want to see it? And also, like I've heard people say, yeah, it's not about the thing, it's about how the thing makes you feel. And I mean, I think there's definitely some value in that. And for sure, we all want to feel those elevated emotions, the joy, the euphoria, the bliss. But I think it goes beyond that. And because I think feelings and emotions and thoughts, like these are all just like the conditions, like they're always changing. And so to have that, and also it can place a lot of pressure on yourself, especially when I first learned about manifestation and spirituality and law of attraction. And I thought I just had to think positive all the time, and that if I let any so-called low vibe emotions, if I felt any of those, then I was going to experience something either really bad or that I would just never experience whatever it was that I wanted. And so that is not a very flow-based way to go about living, and it could actually end up creating a lot of stress for yourself. But the one thing that never changes beyond conditions, beyond appearances, beyond thoughts, beyond feelings is your I am awareness. And that, which I refer to as like going back to the center court in tennis, that's something that you can always come back to at any moment. And at any moment, you can always ask yourself, how do I choose to see this situation? And do I choose to see the situation through the eyes of lack, or do I choose to see it through the eyes of love? And so I hope that you find this message very liberating. And I hope you recognize more and more so each day that it really isn't about the thing. And it's really not about the appearances, but rather it's how you choose to see the appearances. And so, with that, thank you so much for watching and have a wonderful day.